The U.S. Secretary of State's in China, Rex Tillerson, paving the way for the visit in November by Donald Trump. That was announced this Friday. Now, before Tillerson's departure from Washington, his State Department stating that Beijing is making progress in enforcing sanctions imposed on North Korea and urging skeptical members of Congress to hold off on new sanctions against Pyongyang to see if the current ones are effective. For more, we're joined by Alice Ekman, head of the China Research Center at the Center for Asian Studies, IFRI. Thank you for being with us.
Welcome.
Just back from Korea.
Yeah.
The visit by Rex Tillerson, of course, we saw statements like the one made this week by the former CIA director, David Petraeus, saying that when Donald Trump speaks vociferously about Korea, it's because he's sending messages to Beijing. What are your thoughts on what is top of the agenda for this visit by Rex Tillerson?
Well, at the top of the agenda is very concrete, is the preparation of Trump's visit. As you mentioned, it will take place in November. It will be an important visit, much more important than the encounter, informal meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago in April. So very concretely, it's the preparation of this visit, and I think we should not expect too much of a preparation meeting in particular. But as you mentioned as well, Korean Peninsula will be also second topic, second priority of the meeting, with, I think, very different views from Beijing and Washington. At the moment, when you read Chinese official communication and Chinese press, you could see that they underline the weaknesses of Trump's communication, and they are both very, not very, but quite critical about North Korea, but also about South Korea and the US. So I would say this is an ambivalent communication that give us some hint that China will not necessarily shift its position on the Korean Peninsula.
So what do you make of this statement on Thursday by the State Department saying that, well, they were doing a better job of enforcing sanctions on Pyongyang?
Well, it's true that action have been taken place very recently. A few days ago, China announced that it will close some North Korean companies' joint venture present on the Chinese territory. And it has voted the last resolution at the UN Security Council. So there is some evolution. At the same time, I think we will only be able to judge a full implementation of this sanction with few weeks and months later. This is quite early to see how much China will implement these sanctions. And once again, I think the discourse is quite ambivalent. I think also we tend to...
Is it ambivalent because that's just the way the Chinese communicate? Or is it because they're a little bit caught off guard by Donald Trump? He's not a traditional kind of politician.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Really, actually, when we read the Chinese press, for example, China Daily or even People's Daily really said that, well, actually, Tillerson is the adult, and Trump, meaning that Trump is a child. So they like also to play on the divergences that may exist in Washington, on the lack of coordination. So I don't know if for them this is an issue, lack of credibility, or it's an opportunity to present themselves as a responsible power with a sound communication in coherence with what have been said previously.
Make it sound like the Chinese own Trump.
Well, at least I think China considers that its diplomacy and foreign policy is much more coherent than the one in Washington. And I think they want to make the most out of the weaknesses that they might see in Washington.
Let me ask you, because that meeting is going to happen in November, Donald Trump's visit. Before that, there's the Congress of the Communist Party that's to take place. And we have news today. The expulsion from the ranks of the Communist Party, one of the former contender for a top post, who was the Politburo member Sun Zhenkai, formerly the head of Chongqing, the city in the southwest of the country. Maneuvering going on around the Communist Party Congress, it seems.
Well, if I remember well, he was already in the investigation.
Since July.
Yeah, so this is not new, but it's true that we are in a period of intense preparation of the 90th Party Congress, which will take place on the 18th of October. So it's interesting because we are very much in the preparation time, and also Trump's visit to China in November will take place shortly after the Congress, so I think we should not expect much both of the preparation meeting and also the fact that Trump will visit shortly after the Congress might limit the nature of the exchange and the depth of
all
the
exchange. All the attention's on the maneuvering around the party Congress.
But to go back to your question, I think what we can expect, and the case you mentioned indicates consolidation of power of Xi Jinping for the next 5 years, if not more. I think we tend to, as China analysts, we tend to, at least 5 years ago at an 18th Party Congress, try to make some forecasts who will be at which position, and basically try to find the exact name of the right person and anticipate the nomination to see if there is new orientation in terms of domestic and foreign policy. I think this is not so relevant today because Xi Jinping has also already very much consolidated its power over the last 5 years. So whatever nomination...
Normally, this is supposed to be the Congress where he sort of names an heir apparent, and there's word that he may not do that this time.
Yeah, he may not do it. So, to be honest, nobody knows exactly at this time because there is such a level of opacity that surrounds the party apparatus, much more than 5 years ago, that it would be risky. Yeah, much more. Yeah, opacity has been forced, so it's much more. It's harder for you, journalists, for us, researchers, to make forecasts that are relevant and based on actual facts. But we have facts from the last 5 years, and all indicates institutional consolidation of individual power of Xi Jinping, also ideological consolidation and political discipline reinforcement. And the big movement that have been used for such reinforcement is the anti-corruption movement that has been launched shortly after Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, but lasted much more than expected, and it's still ongoing, and extending now to other institutions. Before it concentrated on ministries, on SOE, state-owned enterprises. Now also it's focused on universities, and it's also, one of the objectives is to make sure that ideological purity, or basically full loyalty to the party, is well in place in such institutions.
Alice Ekman, very briefly, Xi Jinping is already branded as the most powerful leader of China since Deng Xiaoping. Can he be even more powerful in view of what you've just described when he meets Donald Trump in November after that party Congress?
Depends how you define power. For sure, if you define power also by the level of fear that you manage to let's say, instill in your country. For sure, party cadres today in China are more fearful about Xi Jinping than they were of Hu Jintao, his predecessor. But any system has its weaknesses, and I wouldn't say that, on the contrary, exaggerate the power of Xi Jinping. He has to deal with China that is diverse, which is also using new communication technologies, with China that is very much watched by outsiders and such as like us. So it's a China that more actors are following, are understanding, and in this sense, this is also a challenge for China. And I think, in terms of foreign policy processes and practices, I think China's diplomacy is pretty strong. If you look at the diplomatic corps, the professionalism of many officials, and it can be an advantage or disadvantage, but its coordination capabilities. Chinese diplomacy is able to promote the same message through various channels, and all this under the supervision of the party and first and foremost Xi Jinping. So at the end, the lobbying power, communication power is much stronger than democracies. And they all sing from the same hymn sheet. Alice Ekman, I want to thank you for joining us. Welcome.